Mahalo elele, and welcome everyone to another live digital kava session here on the Polynesian Eyes podcast. You have here Lone Rangering today, Tuafale. Mr. Atera is still traveling, the world traveler. He is in Hawaii. He did a whole tour of the United States, and now he's in Hawaii and on his last leg, and he should be back to Aotearoa here in the near future. So once he gets back and is in the middle of continuing everything that's going on there, he'll join us here on the Polynesian Ice podcast. But for the time being, you guys will have me here to join and drive the live digital kava sessions. Just real quick before we get started, as usual, we appreciate everyone's support, everyone's pitching in through live chats and super thanks, and also for joining the channel as a member. We also appreciate everyone who has been sharing and commenting all of our content on the various different platforms that we go live on and also post our content online. So really appreciate all the support everyone has given there. Today, we're going to have a reaction to two videos. One of them we have discussed previously, and that is really a interesting take on the age of the Ha'amonga, a Maui in on Tongatapu. And really, this video kind of looks into how and why this individual takes a unique way of looking on how we can date the Ha'amonga Maui. So that'll be our first video that we kind of look at and respond to. The second one will be from King Afa, and he talks about an idea that is often shared by academics and others on the idea of Maamalangi and Pulotu. And there is a interpretation that that represents, Tonga, Samoa, and Fiji, and we'll kind of talk through that as we go through the program. So that's going to be the first part. I'm going to go ahead and bring this up. If have any questions, comments, please throw it in the chat, and we will do our best to share those, especially those that are relevant to the topic and what we're trying to achieve in the program today. So we're going to start with this video, and this gentleman, takes an interesting take on the Ha'amonga Maui. We're just going to watch it real quick and react to it.
Have you ever heard of Hamonga Maui? Well, I have, and it's in Tonga, where the Hunga Tonga eruption took place. And some of the most ancient artifacts on Earth still exist in a tropical region. Now, this massive Trilithon, and it's a trilithon because it's consisting of three major megalithic stones, has been nicknamed the Stonehenge of the Pacific. And just like the Moai has a completely ludicrous story associated with it. And we'll get to that in a moment. These standing stones with a lintel on top on the island of Tongatapu, Hamonga Maui, stands about 17 feet tall and 19 feet long. Each coral limestone slab weighs 30 to 40 tons. And because of its clear resemblance, it has been nicknamed Stonehenge of the Pacific. Now, the historical stories tell us a tale of nonsense. Archaeologists seem to believe that the Hamonga was built by an early 13th century king as a gateway to his royal palace.
We'll pause that real quick. It's kind of interesting, this gentleman, and let's see what's the name of his channel. So the name of his channel is Magnetic Reversal News, right? I mean, it's interesting that he brings it up that, number one, the size and how significant this ruin is. He highlights how important it is and how, the idea that it's just a simple entrance to a residence is kind of like underwhelming, right? And to think that that's what it is basically a giant entryway without any walls, without any other type of sophisticated structure around it to justify it being quote unquote an entry to a residence or to a settlement. So he brings up a great point there.
Complete fairy tale. Otherwise, it has been suggested it might have been used for astrological purposes. But
Yeah.
if you set up a couple rocks, they line up with something. Now, don't they? Now, these theories are unconfirmed. However, and the origin of the huge Trilithon remains a mystery. Or does it? And tonight, we're going to break it down like you've never seen it before. Amonga, a Maui, sometimes referred to as the burden of Maui, is clearly leaning to the left. So it has been moving. Not so much, but you can imagine through time the types of movements, such as the Great Sphinx of Egypt and the work of Robert Schoch, where by a simple geologic analysis of the weathering patterns, he uncovered a startling fact that the Sphinx cannot be the age that they suggest due to the weathering rivulets, and must be at least 8, 10,000, 12,000 years or more, because there was no weathering and water running in this region for at least 8,000 years. So this weathering, this erosion, must have occurred after the Sphinx was erected and excavated, placing the age of the Sphinx at an unprecedented 8 to 12,000 years ago. Now, if we look at some of the historical pictures of Hamonga in Maui, Hamonga Maui, and we also consider some important facts. Well, you're not going to be able to get it to here, but
imagine being able to build anything.
That's what's really interesting of what he's bringing in here is he's having the discussion on weathering patterns. And that was something that was used to date structures and timelines of the Sphinx and other ancient ruins in Egypt. And that's how they were able to date how old some of these things were. So he is expressing that we need to look at the weathering patterns and see if there's any way we can look at the Ha'amonga and see what kind of weathering patterns we can draw from to try and help date the Ha'amonga Maui, right? Because right now, as he mentioned earlier, the generally accepted explanation is between 1200s and 1500s, which is during the time of Momo and Tuitatui-ish, that the Ha'amonga Maui was built.
the Trilithon itself has been photographed for hundreds of years, and we have that data. But what met my fancy was the lintel, and the fact that if someone would take the time to move a 20-ton lintel up into 30-ton blocks, they would have made a tight fit. And you can see here the lintel is leaning. And it is not just leaning in modern times or has been eroded, leaving a 10-centimeter gap. The same gap existed 200 years ago.
And that's something that I think is important to take a note of, right? Is these stones, not only their size are unique, right, because of how difficult it is, but also with the oral history that says these stones were probably sourced hundreds of miles away, right, from Uvea or Futuna and other parts of Polynesia. So that once again makes it more important to take into account. Really, all of that effort just for a quote unquote entry point to a residence, that doesn't make sense, right? And that is where you just got to ask a few questions. And he's noticing that gap.
There has been no
right, that gap right here. And I think it's a fair assumption to make. If you go through all that effort to do that, that you would at least would have probably had a snug fit on the top of the amonga with the lentil. As always, we do take time to recognize our paying members of the channel. Mel, Venu, Malo, appreciate the support. And as you can see, she has that marker on her name for being a member of the channel and greatly appreciated. Malo, Vel.
Change in the erosional pattern in 200 years. Yet they want you to believe that this is only 800 years old or so. Maybe even 700. But that couldn't be further from the truth. The people that built this made this lentil fit tight, and it has since eroded. And even back in the 1800s, it had eroded 10 centimeters. Now, if we look at the rates of weathering of limestone from multiple sources like this one, we're going to get an average rate of about 1/20th of a centimeter every 100 years of dissolution in modern times, not in ancient times. And this is due to the acidification of rain.
From the pollution.
Limestone weathering rates have accelerated by micron scale grain detachment and acidic rain in modern times. And we can use this data, the measurements of weathering rates of stone structures, to infer how long it took to weather this 10 centimeters of limestone. And if you just do the simple maths, 1/20th per 100 years, it takes 2,000 years to weather 1 centimeter of limestone in this tropical region. And if we're talking about 10 centimeters, bigger than this man's head.
So let's just pause there real quick. So really what he's proposing here is, so he's not just making stuff up. He's saying, number one, fair assumption. Let's look at the weathering patterns here and assume that if you were going to go through the effort to build something of this size, it would have been a snug fit. I think that's a fair point. I mean, we look at all the Langis in Tonga and how those stones initially were square and in place, and they've moved over time out of alignment. And then he goes to the scientific reality of they've measured how limestone erodes over time, and then he makes a calculation there, right? Where it's like what, 1 centimeter every 1,000 years, 1 to 2,000 years. And now he's saying if that's what it is, then 10 centimeters has to be at least 10,000 years.
That's 2,000 times 25.4. That means that this monolith could have been built up to 50,000 years ago and has since been sitting here and weathering. But that's based on modern weathering rates due to acid rain. So we could easily push this back to 75 or 100,000 years from present, or even.
That's something pretty crazy, right? That we're looking at a structure that could have been built tens and tens of thousands of years ago. If we were to look at the weathering patterns, which is something that has been done in other parts of the world to date certain structures. And I think that's pretty cool. Go to a couple comments here. JM says, all from ancient Tongan Lapita origin settlement of Polynesia, Hikuleo, Maui, and Tangaloa, Futuna, Uvea, Ha'amoa, Hihifo, Ha'amoa, Hake, parts of ancient Tongan Empire. 100% JM, appreciate that comment. Also here from Lotu Mafileo says, Toko, are you seeing the Kalia revival? I'm assuming that's revival that's happening in Tonga at the moment. I have seen some videos, Lotu, of a gentleman who, is it Fehoko, I want to say, but he is doing a lot of work on Kalia and on carving and on art. But I think this is great if there is a revival of the Kalia, because I think, or it's my opinion after reading a lot of things, that the Tongans were the ones who were actually known for the very large boats. right? And that's those large karias, like the Lomi Peao, those are some of the ones that have the very famous names. Those are the ones that brought stones from hundreds of miles away to Tongatapu. So that'd be really cool, Lotu, if that's happening. And we'll probably have to dig into it a little bit as to how exactly the revival is going on the Kalia. But I think that's great because I think the Tongan Empire had a rare, unique advantage in Kalias. Mel Venu says, could the Ha'amonga be a gateway of the light for the constellation point for the eastern and western anchor? I'm not sure what you mean by a gateway of the light. We believe here on the show, Mel, that it was used to track the seasons and is part of a representation of the constellations in the sky on Earth, right? And there is a constellation called the Ha'amonga, and it was a critical constellation. It allows you to navigate on the northern and southern hemisphere 6 months of the year. So it has something to do with constellations and ancient navigation, which is why I think it's unique that Tongatapu is the only one that has a ha'amonga on it. That speaks to volumes of the knowledge of the heavens, how it was duplicated here on Earth, and how this was used to manage navigation, farming, and tracking of constellations in the sky.
Further, because Mario Buildreps believes that this monolith was in place a long time ago. And I concur. Based on the weathering patterns alone, there is no lentil, modern lentil, even in this region, in southwest Colorado, where the Pueblo lived. Most lentils are still in place. This one is clearly leaning and clearly weathered massively. The ancients that placed this lentil here would have not placed a small lentil in this perfectly cut hole. It would have fit tight. Like all megaliths fit tight. But this one happens to be limestone, much different than granite or other megalithic structures that weather at a rate of 1 millimeter per million years. This one happens to be limestone that weathers a little quicker, just like the siltstone at the Sphinx.
Mm-hmm. If you don't, so once again, he makes for my perspective, a pretty compelling argument, and this is not something that hasn't been done elsewhere. This weathering information is not something that's untested and unverified. This is pretty scientific on the weathering patterns. So I think he brings a interesting point there. And then also with Devita Fale's work, he also confirms that the Ha'amonga was not built by the Tuitonga Tuitatui or his son. By the Tuitonga Momo or his son Tuitatui. That the Ha'amonga Maui was built much, much earlier by the Ha'amaui clan when they first settled Tongatapu thousands and thousands of years ago. So this seems to kind of validate a lot of that perspective. which Tonga probably doesn't have a ton of acid rain. Oh, shoot. Hey, appreciate that, Javier. We'll go back. I didn't realize it wasn't playing the sound. Appreciate it, Javier. Thank you. Sound should be working. Let me know if it isn't, but I have it back on.
Where the Pueblo lived, most lentils are still in place. And I concur. In years from present.
Let's do that.
Or even further. Because Mario Buildreps believes that this monolith was in place a long time ago. And I concur. Based on the weathering patterns alone, there is no lentil, modern lentil, even in this region, in southwest Colorado, where the Pueblo lived. Most lentils are still in place. This one is clearly leaning and clearly weathered massively. The ancients that placed this lentil here would have not placed a small lentil in this perfectly cut hole. It would have fit tight. Like all megaliths fit tight. But this one happens to be limestone, much different than granite or other megalithic structures that weather at a rate of 1 millimeter per million years. This one happens to be limestone that weathers a little quicker, just like the siltstone at the Sphinx. Yep. Same type of rapid weathering that we can calculate a date from. Same one here. And this lentil was placed at a minimum of 50,000 years ago and probably much longer.
Interesting.
And for that, well, we can just look at the historical pictures and see that there has been zero change in the weathering. Here we see 1, 2, 3 bumps on the top of the lentil. And here we see the same 1, 2, 3 bumps on the lentil. Here we see a widening gap at the bottom and a little chink up high. And this is the same picture from a different angle with very little change in 200 years. And there's a reason for that. The reason this lentil is leaning is because it's been weathering for tens of thousands of years, even with an increased rate in the last few hundred years with acid rain. We're using science to view this for the first time. Very few people even know about this object. And just like the work of Robert Schoch, it is clear due to weathering evidence and statistics that this monolith, this megalith, was built 50 to 70,000 years ago.
Which is a crazy thought. That's a crazy thought.
And that is spectacular. And just to
and you know, the oral history that we have is that the first settlers on Tongatapu was Maui and Tangaloa and Haamea or Taula, who came to Tonga, and we don't have a clear understanding of when they first arrived to Tonga. What we do know is the title of Tangaloa was continued over and over until Aho'eitu. Then power was transferred from Tangaloa to Aho'eitu with the Tu'itonga, that there was a transition of power there and a change in the structure of the government. But to really think that there's a possibility this was 50,000 years or more is very, very interesting. That is kind of rare thing to think about. And to say, hey, does this mean it's like 100% accurate proof? No, but it's a fair position to take, right? He's using a technique that was used to date things in Egypt, right? And using weathering patterns. And I think it's a fair assumption. When this was built, the lentil or that top piece was probably snug, right? And that makes sense. Like if you're sophisticated enough to build this big of a structure and to carry it from wherever, even if it only moved within Tongatapu itself, you would have built it snug. And so I think this guy has a reasonable
few days. I was able to research this object and come up with the conclusion that is hard to deny. No megalithic culture would have fit a loose lentil inside of megalithic vertical arms. This is a weathering pattern that is calculable, just like the Sphinx. Right in your face. And any undergraduate or master's student could simply report on this as a thesis. But there's no funding available because it does not fit in the mainstream narrative.
Yep.
Just like we don't. And that's a boom to knowledge. Right in your face. What a disgrace mainstream science is. When an independent researcher can just pick a megalithic structure and make a breakthrough in a week. I don't know if anyone else has put these pieces together, but there are thousands of other structures similar to this where we can look at weathering patterns of granite, andesite, tuff, or whatever material they're being built from, and make a deduction that the current narrative that this was built 800 years ago is a complete fantasy. Because based on weathering rates, the most recent time it was built was 40, 50,000 years ago, and has been sitting here ever since, untouched by humans. Well, touched by humans, but not destroyed. And that is a boom to knowledge. Proper prior planning and prevents piss poor performance in a dystopian world where mainstream science is dead. And if you have a few idle hours, you could probably uncover some amazing things. Welcome to Magnetic Reversal News. And the boom you need to know.
So that's kind of interesting for those who are interested in looking this up. Reference, it's you search Ha'amonga Maui new dating revealed, and it's Magnetic Reversal News. That's something that's kind of interesting. You look this up on your own. I always have to recognize Mika Lociale 9M. Thank you for being a member of the channel. And he says, also, I watched a short video by Samoan POV episode 14. He talks about the Bighorn medicine wheel connection to Maui map. Very interesting. We'll have to check that out as well, Mika. But thank you for sharing the link to this video. And, the whole reason why we wanted to bring this up is really just to kind of expand the way we look at our Polynesian history and to just see how powerful simple questions are. And this gentleman brings an interesting way of looking at it. He says, let's look at weathering patterns, right? That we have scientific documentation on how these things weather. And with the fair assumption that lentil or that top piece on the ha'amonga, more likely than not, used to be a snug fit. And the reason why that it isn't is because over time, the lentil and the gap between the two vertical structures was eroding over time. Water, rain, whatever you want to call it, seismic activity causing the stones to rub against each other and drive more weathering. Who knows? But the point is, he brings a good point and reason and logic as to how he came to his conclusion. Whether you agree or disagree, that's a whole different point. But he brought something to the table that we can all look at, think about, and have a discussion on. And I think he brings some reasonable points there. And, like I said, why is it that Tongatapu is the only one that has that type of structure in Polynesia? Why is Tongatapu the only one that has a megalithic structure that's called Ha'amonga Maui, right? And that we have constellations in the sky that was used for navigating by our ancestors. And it just so happens to be that one of the most important constellation is also Ha'amonga in the sky. And also close to Navtoka, there's also Ha'amonga made out of dirt in that shape. So that's another powerful example and relation to the Ha'amonga, the standing stone the megalith structure there. So thought that was really interesting. And we're going to close out the show today looking at another video, because now that we've looked at that in a unique way to try and understand better the age of the Ha'amonga, and really opened up our eyes to, there's a real chance that the history in Tonga goes tens of thousands of years, which also means that the history of Polynesia goes back tens of thousands of years, right? I want to make that clear, that we take the position that our ancestors have been here in Polynesia for a very long time. We won't know for sure, but from all indications, it could be tens of thousands of years based off the Ha'amonga alone. So this next one is, we're going to watch a video by our good friend King Afa, and he kind of talks about an idea that academics have on trying to explain our history and our origins, and just kind of listen to that and react to that before we close out the quick show today.
Tongan scholars and Samoans also believe this theory too. They believe that Langi means Samoa, and Mama means Tonga, and Pulotu means Fiji.
That one is kind of interesting. I had never heard that until recently, right? These academics had come up with naming Langi, Mama, and Pulotu, that it actually meant Tonga, Samoa, and Fiji, right? I had never really heard that before until recently.
The first Polynesian civilization, the first Polynesian cultures, the oldest Polynesian cultures. Let's break down Pulotu first, on Fijian Pulotu, Samoan and Tongan Pulotu. What is Pulotu? The underworld, the afterlife, the afterworld. All right, ask the Samoans, the Tongans, and the Fijians, where is Pulotu? Fiji, in an island called Matuku, in the Lau group, south of the Lau group. All right, let's ask the Tongans, where is the entrance to Pulotu in Tonga? Ewa Island and Ata Island. Let's ask the Samoans.
And that's also interesting because, according to Te Vitafale, Ata Island is where Tangaloa, Maui, and Ha'amea or Taula first landed, was on Ata until they discovered Tongatapu. Then they settled on Tongatapu on the Halariku side, which was named Hokula. And, we kind of agree here with the position here that King Afa is taking, is Pulotu is the spirit realm. It's really not a physical location on Earth. And a lot of times when we reference that Pulotu is to the west, it is in using that as a metaphor of the spirit world, because the sun rises in the east, which is like birth, and it sets in the west, which is death. And that's where the entry point to Pulotu is, when you die, the sunset of your life. And that's where you enter. So, somehow, some way, the academics have come to the conclusion that Pulotu is a physical place, but we don't take that position, and take a very strong position that Pulotu is the spirit world, and you will go there. We will all go there someday, but that's in the spirit realm.
Where is their entrance to Pulotu? In Samoa. That is where the two Samoan twins, Kaima and Tilafainga, traveled to Fiji and received a tattoo from Fiji. One of those tattooed twins from Fiji is the mother of Nafanua, the Samoan war goddess. All right, so we understand the Pulotu now. Let's discuss Mama. They said that Mama means Tonga. What does Tonga mean in Tonga? South.
Mm.
What does Tongatapu mean? Sacred land in the south. Sacred garden in the south. What does Mama mean in Tonga? Light. You turn on the light. It's Mama. It's bright. A bright light. Since they were discussing about Tonga, what is
Another interesting thing of the mama, and I don't know if he gets it to here, but mama is also it's rooted from Maamalangi, and mama can mean a world or a place, right?
name of a Tonga that uses the word Mama? 39 Tonga was recorded by the British, the Catholic, the French. But for us Tongans, we know that there is more than 43 Tonga, because there was Tonga Fifine. There were women who was Tonga. And then there was a Fijian, Tapos. There was also
Yeah, I'm not quite sure on that. I know there's like a tuitonga fefine, but that's someone who's Eiki or from the female side of the tuitonga, but did not have the same power and role on that. So I'm not aware of any declared tuitonga fefine in the sense that they replaced the tuitonga. There was a tuitonga fefine, but my understanding is they weren't the same role.
a statue who was a Tonga. Which Tonga used the word Mama as their name? Tell us a settlement in Tonga that is called Mama.
Yeah, none of them have
The
that.
first Tonga was Auitu. And what is the first residence name of the Tonga? Talanga. His father came from the heavens, from Langi, from the sky. The question for these coconut historians: the residents of the Tonga, all the Tonga. Tell me a resident that is called Mama.
Yeah, it's none of them.
The residence of the Tonga towards Tupou College is called Toloa. The residence of the Tonga outside of Perihake is called Ahau. To live surround the Hau. The Tonga that lived in New Toa was Tuitatui, where the Hamonga is, the Tongan time machine, the megalithic Trilithon structure, and the name of the residence is Heketa. The name of the Tonga residence right next to Heketa is Afa, storm, fury, from the Tonga, the ancient capital, where the pyramids are, one of the pyramids. What is the name of the royal Tonga burial ground in Mua, Lapaha? It's called a Langi. What do we call the royal tombs of the Tongan kings? We call them Mama, do we call them Langi? In our Tongan legends, who brought the fire? The creation of Tongans. Who brought the fire for cooking, to keep us warm, to bring light, for fishing? Amma. Maui Kiskisi brought the fire. Where did Maui Kiskisi brought the fire from? From the underworld, from Pulotu. The gods of the underworld, Pulotu, are the Mauis, and Hikuleo. Hikuleo was the woman. Where did the Maui people get the fire from? The volcano. Last word, Langi. They say Langi means Samoa. Let's ask the Samoans. What does Samoa mean? Sa, clan. How do we say clan in Tonga? Ha'a. Tongans are the only people in the world who call Samoa Ha'amoa, because we call them, those are people from the clan of Moa. Ask
Yeah.
the Samoans. How was Moa created? The first creation of a Samoan. Moa came from a rock. Samoans always say they come from a rock. Dwayne Johnson's the rock. Ask the Samoan, what does Langi mean in Samoan? Ask the Tongans, what does Langi mean in Tonga? Ask the Fijian, what does Langi mean in Fiji? Heavens, Describe. Let's ask the Samoans. Tell us the name of the Tui Manua that uses the word Langi. Tell us the name of a Samoan king, Samoan paramount chiefs that use the word Langi. From Upolu, Hawaii, independent Samoa. From Tutuila, Manua Islands, American Samoa. If they come and claim that Tonga means mama and Samoa means Langi and Pulotu means Fiji, they need to explain themselves so that it makes sense to the Tongan, Samoan, and the Fijian children. They need to explain clearly so that Samoans and Tongan youngsters, the young people, can understand. You know, right now, all those Tongan scholars, they just confuse the Tongans. 100,000 Tongans. They just confuse all of them.
Interesting, right? He makes some interesting points. Basically, he's challenging them. If Langi is Ha'amoa and Mama is Tonga and Pulotu is Fiji, how come those names aren't commonly used or attributed to their leaders and people of importance in their roles, right? Like the Tuitonga never really had a residence called Mama, and in Ha'amoa as well, where they originate from. And I think he asked some fair questions there. Last couple comments here from Mika. He says Fiti to Samoan is Fitiuta in Manua, not Fiji. Apparently Tu'i Fiti in Manua. Not sure what you mean by that, Mika. Maybe if you could kind of clarify that a little bit more. So, and Nonsky says it's been a while. Malo kautama, malo, Nonsky. Great to have you here on the live digital kava session. But you know, in listening, I know a lot of people give King Alpha, a hard time. And I don't necessarily agree with everything he said there. But I think when I listen to the root of his point is, number one, we don't know a lot of times where these academics, quote unquote, make these connections. And we just because they say it and just because they're academics doesn't mean that they're right. And we can ask very simple questions. We can observe what we see as what makes sense or doesn't make sense. And we can listen to all sides. We can consider all sides. But at the end of the day, each and every one of us has to make our own conclusions and come to a decision on our position based off of what we think makes sense for us personally and also from an objective perspective as well. So yeah, we're definitely not in the camp that believes that Pulotu meant Fiji and that Mama meant Tonga and that Langi meant Samoa. That's an oversimplification and seems like a modern idea, just like the Pulemele mound, right? The locals there never heard that word Pulemele before, but suddenly, once the academics came to study it, all of a sudden it came out with a name that a lot of the locals never really heard of. And that's kind of one of the areas that we think we can try and help the academics be a little bit more wiser and maybe to really voice out the opinions more from the oral history and from the history held by those in those areas. That is kind of the show for today. It was a quick one. We won't have a live digital kava session next week. Mr. Atera is still traveling. I am traveling. I will be out of the country for about a week for work. And so that will force us to not have live digital kava sessions next week. However, the following week, Mr. Atera should be back and we will be able to have more live digital kava sessions there in the near future. Really appreciate everyone's time, support. Appreciate it when you like, comment, and share our content on the various platforms. Appreciate all the super thanks and the super chats that everyone had shared. We really appreciate all the support and look forward to a busy October for the podcast. We have multiple guests that we have lined up. We were actually going to record an interview tomorrow morning, but with Mr. Atearoa's schedule and also mine being gone all of next week, we pushed those out. But we have 2, possibly 3 guest interviews next month that we hope to do recordings and release those. And then also other episodes we have planned together for when Mr. Atearoa is available. With that being said, I really appreciate everyone's time. And as always, and I think this is important, this was kind of the purpose behind these 2 videos, is it aligns with what we invite every listener and viewer on the program, and that is to be bold, right? Stay curious and ask the hard questions. We are seeking for truth. We are seeking for discussion. We're seeking for others to share what their position is, what they see, what they've learned, so that we can all benefit from it. And that's an important part of the live digital kava sessions. You have to be open-minded. You have to be willing to throw out your ideas to be challenged, and don't take it personal when an idea is challenged, but look at it as an opportunity to improve the idea and give it more strength to overcome the future assaults on it as it tries to defend itself in the arena of the live digital kava session. With that being said, I will repeat what we like to close every episode and every live digital kava session in it. And once again, it is: be bold. Don't be afraid to ask the hard questions, and always, always, always stay curious. All right. Till next time. Peace.